Alright, so welcome back. In this section, we are going to focus on computer networks. Okay, before we go into hacking, we first need to understand a few things about computer networks. So in this section, we will cover a few terminologies and things that we need to understand before we start the hacking process. So first thing we need to learn is called computer networks. So what are computer networks? So we will learn about what a network is and how it works. So what's the definition of a computer network? A computer network is nothing but simply a connection or a group of connected devices. So every device that is connected with each other forms a network. So it could be, there are different types of network. We will see later what kind of networks there are. But the basic idea behind networking is that every communicating device or every device that is able to communicate data with each other forms a network. A network could be either physical or wireless. For example, a Wi-Fi is a wireless network. Similarly, there are other networks. For example, if you have a LAN or Ethernet connection, this connection is usually called a physical or wired connection. And the core idea behind networks is that in networks, the devices are able to communicate or exchange data with each other. It could be a simple connection like a Bluetooth connection, even though this is not able to access the internet, but still it is able to communicate data with each other. So a Bluetooth connection is a kind of a network. So how do we understand network visually? So let's say you have a few devices. Let's say you have a mobile phone, a laptop, or a desktop PC, and they are all connected with each other. So even if they are not connected to internet and they are connected with each other through a router, this still forms a network, and this is called a local area network. Even if there is no internet connectivity between these two devices, they will still be able to transmit data from one device to another in the same network if they are connected to a same router. So I will explain what a router is, just bear with me. So the same idea is that if they are able to communicate, they form a network, and this is usually called a local area network or LAN in simple terms. And the next thing we need to learn is what's a node. A node is nothing but every communicating device inside a network. So nodes are defined by their addresses. So for example, if you have a if you have a mobile that is connected to your Wi-Fi, and similarly at the same time you have your laptop connected to the Wi-Fi, these two devices are called nodes and they will have unique addresses. I will explain what an address is next, but for the moment just understand that a node is just any connecting device inside your network. And now comes the concept of address. So we humans are identified by our names, but machines do not understand this language. So in order for machines to be able to communicate with each other, they need to know addresses in the form of numbers. So a node address is nothing but a simple 32-bit number. They are uniquely identifiable and they are numeric quantities, which means they are either numbers. They could be strings, which is a whole different topic. These addresses or these numbers helps machines to communicate with each other. So if the machine does not have a proper address, it won't be able to communicate properly. So when we are talking about addresses, we are usually referring to the IP address, which is a 32-bit number. So you may have seen this kind of numbers, for example 192.168.0.1, and this is called a private IP address. So using this, so if a router wants to communicate with your device in the same network, it will use your device's IP address, which would be this one. This is just an example. And then associated with addresses is another numeric identifier, which is called a port. So a port is basically a number that identifies a service running on the system. So every communicating device can have multiple services running. So for example, if you have a mobile phone, your mobile phone could communicate with, for example, YouTube. Let's say you have a mobile phone and it's running multiple applications. It is running WhatsApp, it's running browser, it's running some other applications in the background that is consuming or that is connecting or exchanging data with the internet. So how do your mobile phone or your router knows that which data is associated with which service or which application? So this is done through ports. So every port or every data that is coming from a specific port is associated with a specific service. For example, if your every data or every internet data that is associated with your browser or with HTTP, which is a hypertext transfer protocol, will come through port number 80. And ports are usually a 16-bit numbers, so they range from 1 to 65,535. And one important thing to note about ports is that from port 1 to first 1K ports or 1024 ports are reserved, so you should not use them if you are developing a program. Use ports number that are higher than these numbers because they will interfere with the normal functioning of your PC. So as I already said, that different application or different services have different port numbers associated with them. So for example, hyper HTTP or a simple text transfer protocol which was used earlier for web browsing is associated with port number 80. It's still used, but it's not very common nowadays. Most of the websites use this HTTPS protocol, which is a secure version of the same protocol. And then there is another protocol called FTP, which is used for file transfer. Okay, so now we are familiar with networks and nodes and addresses. So the next thing we need to learn is what's an internet. An internet is nothing but simply a group of or a global connection of group of networks. So every network that is connected worldwide forms a global network called internet. So a form of www or World Wide Web is a global network that is usually referred to the internet, but this is not the internet. This is just a part of internet, and the internet is a very broad network. Okay, so the last thing we will learn is called a gateway. So how do we communicate with the internet or devices that are not present inside your own network? So let's say this is your computer and you want to access a server. A server is nothing but a computer that is running 24/7 and that listens for incoming requests and then accordingly responds. So for example, when you access a website, google.com or facebook.com, you make a request to this computer or this server, and then this server will respond accordingly. Let's say you initiate a request from your computer to this PC or this server. So you cannot directly your computer cannot directly communicate with this server. Why? Because this causes a lot of problems in communication. So what they did was that they developed a concept called gateway router. So every local network has only one entry or exit point through this network. So as the name indicates, it's a gateway. So only through this gateway can your data go outside your network or come to your network. So let's say this is your local network and this is the server's network. And then if you want to communicate between these two networks, all your data must go through this router or this gateway device. So you will send a request to this one and it will go through this router, and if the server responds, the whole data will pass through this router and then come to your PC, and this device is called a gateway router. Okay, so MAC addresses are addresses that are used for communication inside your own network. So IP addresses are mostly used for communicating with devices that are not present in your local network, while MAC addresses are used for communicating inside, because inside your own network you can communicate with MAC addresses. And remember that when I said that even if you do not have internet connectivity, you can still communicate inside your own network. So this is because the inside communication is managed by MAC addresses. So even if there is no internet access, you can still use these MAC address to communicate with devices in your own network. And it stands for media access control. So MAC address is associated with each hardware interface. So in your laptop, if you have a Wi-Fi card, so the MAC address will be associated with your Wi-Fi card, and it is used in LAN only. MAC address is a 6-byte or 48-bit address, and it looks something like this. For example, D4 blah blah blah. So that's it. These are very basic terminologies, and in next lecture we will start using or building on top of it. So if you like this course, please rate it, and this will help me in improving my course quality. So thank you, and see you in next lecture.